Hello everyone, welcome to the Arena with Rajnish. We've been on a journey trying to explore various facets and challenges that a leader can face while building a culture of accountability in his organization. One aspect that has repeatedly come up for discussions in this journey has been: how does a leader create a culture of empathy and trust in his team? The need for leader not to use accountability as a sword to fix his people, and the need for leader to create a culture where people feel empowered and confident to take ownership of results. We've also seen in details Michael Tim's 3-step framework to build accountability in organizations. To recall, the 3 steps were: don't blame, look into the mirror, and engineer solutions. But what happens when someone in your team is just not delivering? Despite all the guidance, despite all the support, despite all the clarity that you are providing. And today in the podcast, I'm going to explore this important facet of building accountability in our teams. We are going to look at consequence management in a way that preserves the trust, the empathy, and the psychological safety of the teams. And that's a tightrope walk, isn't it? Because while we as leaders want to be empathetic, kind, and supportive, there comes a time when the leader has to say, enough is enough. The leader needs to draw a line. And what should be the consequences? How should a leader manage consequences in such an eventuality is a question with which I have seen many leaders struggle. And when someone drops the ball in your team, there are typical responses that a leader gives, and these can be categorized into 5 patterns. Let's examine each of these 5 patterns. One of the common responses that leaders exhibit is that they just ignore it, thinking that probably the team or the individual is going to deliver the next time. This silence on part of the leader is actually conveying a loud message to the team that it's okay not to do the things as they are told. It's okay to miss the deadline. Then there are leaders who tend to just cave in. They silently dilute the requirements, either by extending the deadlines or by accepting subpar work. And what happens when in your organization you're constantly doing this? You're building a culture of substandard performance. You're also giving a message to your teams that it's okay to underperform. Then there's this third pattern which many leaders exhibit, is that they constantly nag their teams. They're sitting and hovering on their heads, asking for feedback, asking for progress, and giving feedback day in and day out. When this kind of a feedback is given, it creates a noise which is just not productive, while what is needed is just one simple instruction of what the leader desires. And then there are leaders who never let the ball to drop. They are so passionate about building a culture of accountability that they come to the rescue of their teams whenever they feel that the targets are not going to be achieved. And here is the irony. Many leaders that I interact with who are very keen to build a culture of accountability in their teams have teams where the accountability is really low. And this is because these leaders step in to rescue and never let the ball to drop. When a leader walks in and supports his team in this manner, it may seem noble to begin with, but it erodes confidence and it creates a culture of helplessness in the team. And the last pattern which some leaders exhibit is that they retaliate later. They stay silent, they don't say anything, but they keep it in their minds. And when at some point of time later in the day, there is a performance review or the person is to be detailed on an important project, they strike back. That is not leadership, that is passive aggressiveness. Having seen the patterns in which we can fall in consequence management, what is it that we can do? And I have 3 suggestions to handle consequences in a manner that is effective and empathetic. And the first one is, make sure that your consequences are timely. You know, the way our brain works, anything that happens to us, it relates it to the action that we have done in the immediate vicinity of that reaction. And therefore, do not wait to share the feedback, to take the action on something for the next feedback cycle, or the next month when we are going to meet that individual. But give the feedback, share the feedback right away. Share it firmly but politely. That is the way there are more chances that the individual is going to take corrective actions. The next step to be kept in mind for consequence management is to let the consequences follow their natural course. Often, you don't need to do anything but to let the actions follow their natural course. Let me share an example from personal life. When my son was young and going to school, he had a project to complete wherein he asked me to help him with writing an essay. I told him that I can support you in cultivating your thoughts, but this is your work and you have to write the essay. He slept in the night thinking that his father is going to do the needful. Next day morning, when he went to the school with a half-finished project, he had to face the teacher's reaction. These were natural consequences of his action. No punishment, but just a learning from the realistic way the life moves. You can take an example from your workplace. You have a colleague who's not prepared well for a presentation, walks into the room and faces uncomfortable questions from the other members in the room. In this scenario, there is no reprimand, but just facing the natural reaction of the actions that you have taken is enough to make the individual think and improve. And the next suggestion I have is focus on the behaviors and not the traits. While giving feedback, don't hit below the belt. For example, do not tell a person that you are not detail-oriented. Rather, point out to him the 3 or 4 areas where the details were sketchy or missing, and ask him to examine how he can do that better next time. For when you're focusing on behaviors and choices and not on the identity of the individual, you're opening the doors for improvement, for a growth journey, and not for shame. And to conclude, here's the irony. Leaders who care too deeply about accountability are often the ones who struggle the most in enforcing consequences, because they either rescue too quickly or they shield too often. But if we really want our people to grow, we must allow them to face the discomfort of underperformance, not as a punishment, but to create awareness and growth. And lastly, empathy is not about avoidance. It's about respecting your team, respecting your people enough to tell them the truth and to allow them to rise to the occasion. And if today's podcast has brought any new thoughts, ideas in you, I would be happy to hear them. And see you next time. Till then, bye-bye.